This happened to my boss's best friend when she was 17 years old, and it stuck with me ever since. She lived in a quiet suburban area in Alabama. Her parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving her alone in the house. She wasn't too worried about this. It wasn't the first time she had the house to herself. The night started off normally. She made herself dinner, watched some TV, and then decided to call it a night. She got ready for bed, turned off the lights, and crawled under the covers. She had been really exhausted when she lay down, and she fell asleep almost instantly. Sometime in the middle of the night, she woke up to the soft creak of a door opening. And at first she thought she might have imagined it, but then she felt it. The unmistakable presence of someone else in the room. Every muscle in her body froze. She knew she should turn around, but something in her gut told her not to. Instead, she squeezed her eyes shut and tried to keep her breathing steady, pretending to still be asleep. She heard soft footsteps on the carpet, getting closer. She said the air felt heavier with each step. Then, she felt it. A hand gently brushed her hair back from her face. Fingers lightly traced her cheek, almost like a parent soothing a child. She had to fight every instinct not to scream or flinch. Whoever it was stood there for what felt like an eternity before quietly walking out of the room. The moment she heard the door click shut, she bolted upright. She locked her bedroom door, grabbed her phone, and called her boyfriend, begging him to come over immediately. She was shaking so hard she could barely get the words out. Once she hung up, she called her parents, who told her to call the police. By the time her boyfriend arrived, the cops were already on their way. When the police searched the house, they did not find anyone. But what they did find sent chills down everyone's spine. There were signs that someone had been sneaking in through the doggy door in the back of the house. And it was small, but the guy must have been thin enough to squeeze through. What made it worse was that they did not even have a dog. The door had just been left there from the previous owners, and no one had thought to secure it. The cops decided to check the wooded area behind the house. That's when they found a small, makeshift campsite. There was a tent, empty food wrappers, and some of her clothes. The guy had been watching her for who knows how long. The most horrifying discovery, though, was a stack of videotapes. He had been filming her through her windows, and some of the tapes showed him inside the house, standing over her while she slept. The police eventually caught him a few days later. Turns out, he was a drifter who had been hanging around in the area for months. No one knows why he fixated on her, but the thought that he'd been living so close, watching her every move, has severely traumatized her to this day. She ended up moving away not long after, and her family finally got rid of the doggy door. Honestly, hearing the story was a major wake-up call, because you never expect something like that to happen to you until it does. I grew up in a neighborhood where the houses were set back from the road, each with long driveways and big front yards. It was a quiet area, mostly older folks who lived there forever. One of my neighbors, Jim, was a retired mechanic. He kept to himself, but he was the kind of guy who would wave to you if you drove by, and stop to chat if you ran into him at the mailbox. His property looked like a typical handyman's place. Tools scattered around, a couple of old cars near the garage he used for parts, and lots of projects he probably never got around to finishing. One summer, Jim started hearing strange noises coming from his front yard at night. It was subtle at first, just faint rustling sounds or the occasional clank, like something hitting metal. He assumed it was animals, maybe raccoons or coyotes. We got plenty of both in the area. He set out traps and even caught a couple of raccoons, but the noises did not stop. In fact, they got worse. Jim told me later that he started hearing what sounded like whispering. Not loud, clear voices, but low murmurs, just enough to make him on edge. He'd get up from his recliner, grab a flashlight, and check the yard. Every time there was nothing. No animals, no people, nothing out of place. He started to think maybe he was imagining it. Still though, it kept happening. After a few weeks of this, Jim decided to call the cops. He figured if it wasn't animals, maybe it was kids messing around. They'd come out, take a look around, and tell him that there was no sign of anyone. After the third or fourth call, they told him he needed to stop wasting their time and suggested he get a security camera if he was that worried. Jim's a stubborn guy, so he bought a couple of motion-activated floodlights instead. He installed them around the yard and figured that would scare off whoever, or whatever, was causing the noises. It did not work. The lights would click on at random times during the night, but every time Jim went outside to check, he found nothing. No footprints, no animals, nothing out of place. He started to feel like he was losing his mind. One night, he told me he couldn't sleep. It was one of those hot, sticky evenings where the air barely moves. He went out to his back patio to have a cigarette and try to relax. As he stood there, he heard it again. Voices. This time they were louder than before, like actual people talking, not just whispers. They were coming from the front yard. Jim said he froze for a second, heart pounding, and then decided he had enough. He put out a cigarette and crept around the side of the house, staying in the shadows. When he got to the front, he saw the doors of his old conversion van, one of the derelict vehicles parked in the garage, slowly shutting. Not slamming, not even really closing all the way, just this quiet, deliberate movement. He said his first instinct was to run back inside, which he did. He locked the doors, grabbed his phone, and called the police. This time, he did not tell them about the noises or the whispers. He just said he saw someone on his property, in his van. The police showed up about 15 minutes later. They came in cold, which means no lights, no sirens. Jim watched from his window as they pulled into the driveway and walked toward the van with their flashlights. As soon as they got close, the door swung open and 3 or 4 people bolted out, running in different directions. The cops tried to chase them, but it was dark and the area was wooded, so they did not catch anyone. When they searched the van, they found syringes, spoons, and other drug paraphernalia. It turned out that these people had been using Jim's van as a place to shoot up. They'd probably been coming and going for weeks, maybe longer, hiding out and keeping quiet whenever he came outside to investigate. Jim told me he felt a mix of relief and violation. Relief because he finally had an answer, and violation because these strangers had been right there on his property, so close to his home, doing God knows what. After that night, he had the van towed and got rid of the other old cars. He installed real security cameras and made sure his property was well lit. I always found Jim's story terrifying because it's so mundane. No ghosts, no monsters, just regular people, desperate, dangerous, and right there in his front yard. This happened just a few months ago. I have PTSD, so I take trazodone to help me sleep and prazosin to keep sleep paralysis at bay. I usually have a routine: lock up, set the alarm, take my meds. But that night, I screwed up. I took too much trazodone and passed out hard before setting the alarm. Worse, I forgot to take my prazosin. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to banging and rattling glass on multiple sides of the house. I couldn't move. I couldn't even open my eyes. It felt exactly like sleep paralysis, so I just accepted that I was stuck there until it passed. Time felt weird, like everything was happening too fast and too slow at the same time. Then something even stranger happened. I felt my body move. It wasn't me moving myself. It was like I was being rolled over. My first thought was that I was just caught up in a weird sleep paralysis hallucination. And just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Everything went quiet. Eventually, I fell back asleep normally. The next morning, my mom called me first thing. She asked if I set the alarm. I told her no. She sounded concerned and told me to check my messages. My neighbor had sent over security camera footage of someone breaking into their house. In the video, you could see a man walking back and forth in front of my house. He wasn't doing anything at first, just lingering, pacing. Then he disappeared off screen in the direction of my front door. The doors weren't actually in frame, so I couldn't see if he ever made it inside. But based on what I heard the night before, I had a gut feeling that he did. I reported the noises and the banging to the police, but I left out everything else. I did not mention the feeling of being moved. I did not say that I suspected he got inside. I just told them I heard something in the night, and later saw the video of the guy outside. But the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. My spare key was in a storage bench on my porch. A terrible hiding spot, I know. If he was out there long enough, he could have easily found it. If he did, then he could have come in, seen me passed out in the front room, and decided to leave. Or maybe he didn't leave right away. Maybe he tried to take something, like my phone. I always sleep with it under me. But if he saw the charging cord, maybe he tried to slip it out from underneath me and failed. If that's what happened, then maybe the rolling over I felt was him trying to move me. But I don't know. I was too sedated to wake up fully. It's been messing with my head ever since. I have no proof he actually got inside, but I also have no proof that he didn't. The only thing I know for sure is that he tried. The doors rattling, the banging, the video of him pacing outside. That part is real. The rest, I can only guess. After that night, I changed everything. I got rid of the spare key. I double-checked the locks and set the alarm before I take my meds. I even moved my sleeping setup out to the front room. Because if he did get inside once, I don't want to make it easy for the next guy.